This is the new Pulsar X2V2 and the new Pulsar X2V2 Mini. What has changed? Who is it for? And is it worth the upgrade? Let's start off with what hasn't changed though. So if you don't know what the X2 is about, the shape is really one of the key features here. It's a really unique shape, a really interesting low profile shape that with the original X2, a lot of people loved. And that is completely unchanged here that I quite like. You've got deep finger grooves on the sides and on the clicks. Click position is extremely low, which means more comfort when clicking, especially if you click very aggressively. I find that lower click positions generally reduce the strain on your forearm because your wrist isn't as arched up and your fingers don't have to go all the way back as much. And also the hump is very low profile and very gentle. It is more towards the back of the mouse, so it fills up more towards the back of your mouse, but it is a very low profile hump, so it doesn't quite poke into your palm and it doesn't fill out your palm completely. It just kind of supports it slightly, which some people prefer. I would say that the hump kind of reminds me of like a Viper V2 Pro style hump, but more further back. It definitely feels like a very sleek and slender mouse, especially if you get the right size one for you, and it does feel kind of very freeing. Some people like mice that are puffy and big, that fill out your hand and give you a lot of support. If you are the kind of person that likes the opposite, you like a mouse that gives you a lot of freedom to grip however you like, or the freedom to basically control and manhandle your mouse, it's kind of what this X2 shape is really good for. As for size recommendations, I find that the medium size is a great fit for both claw and fingertip grip for my 19.3 centimeter long hands, but do note I do have pretty short stubby fingers compared to a lot of people, as I've noticed over time. Now, which is probably why I prefer using the medium definitely much more than the mini, since my main grip is a claw grip shape. For this mouse, I find the most comfortable grip to be a relaxed claw grip, because the rearwards kind of position of the hump really supports my palm really well, and I lean off towards the back like this and have more of a relaxed claw grip rather than a more forward leaning aggressive claw grip that has my palm sitting directly on the peak of the hump. As for size recommendations, for the X2V2 medium, I would say that if you have kind of medium to large size hands, it's going to be great for fingertip gripping. So like if your hands are like 18 centimeters and longer, fingertip gripping for this should be fine. If you have kind of medium sized hands, it's going to be a great choice for claw gripping, or so maybe about 17 to 21 centimeter long hands if you're claw gripping. I guess you can get away with slightly bigger hands for claw gripping if you're okay with very aggressive claw grips, but I generally don't recommend against that, because if you have to arch your hand like this, I just don't see how that would be comfortable. Unless it is for you. If it is for you, then whatever. But my personal take is that for most people, it probably won't be. As for the X2V2 Mini, I find that it is a comfortable shape for me to fingertip, but for me to claw grip, I really have to arch my hand like this, and it does get a bit tiring over time. So I wouldn't recommend this mouse for claw gripping for any hands above 18.5 centimeters. Like, this is a fingertip grip mouse for people with medium or large hands, and the Mini is definitely a claw grip mouse for people with smaller hands. So if your hands are under 18.5 centimeters long, you're gonna find claw gripping this to be generally quite nice. Though do note that the Mini is literally just an identical clone of the full size medium, so if you like one shape but just thought it was bigger, the other would do you just fine. So that's the shape, and I just wanted to get it out of the way because shape is absolutely king. But there are a lot of other things in this mouse, and a lot of them have been changed. The clicks, for example, have been changed to optical switches, which are supposedly the same switches as you find in Razer. Now, I personally think that these are a little too stiff, but considering how low the click position is and the fact that you're going to click the mouse at a steep angle, which means you can apply a lot of force very easily, it makes sense that they made it a little bit stiffer, since you don't want people to misclick. I do prefer very light clicks, but I think a lot of people prefer kind of a well-balanced click in the context of the mouse, and this seems to make a lot of sense. These optical switches were feeling different and definitely better in my opinion than the original X2, which kind of felt kind of clunky with the GM 8.0s. They also have an improvement in click latency thanks to better firmware with the better MCU, and also by the fact that they're optical. Supposedly a healthy enough click latency difference that some people can notice it. They can't, because human reaction time is 200 milliseconds, and from what I've seen from the measurements, the click latency improvement is like what, 5 to 10 milliseconds. It's not going to make or break your gaming experience unless you are a top level esports pro and you have 500 Hz gaming display and you have everything top top level. The scroll wheel has been improved from the original X2. I think it feels a bit notchier, a bit more tight, which I really love. And the click is nice and sharp sounding, which is great. The thumb buttons are also improved from the original X2. I think there's less wriggle and less post travel in here. They've basically been perfected, which is great. And the weight is completely the same, which is good. And the sensor also hasn't been changed, but the MCU has been changed. So now it has a Nordic MCU that has support for up to a 4000 Hz polling rate. So if you get the optional 4K Hz dongle, you can basically use this mouse at 4K Hz polling rate, which is nice, I guess. In terms of battery life, on 1000 Hz, it actually lasts a good week or two of pretty heavy gaming on a single charge. So I have no issues with it. If you use it at 4000 Hz, the battery life drops quite significantly, which is definitely still okay. But whether it's worth the additional costs and the trade-off in battery life, whether that 4000 Hz performance is worth it, is completely up to you. By the way, if you want my thoughts on 4000 Hz polling rate, it's basically if you're moving your mouse a lot for tracking tasks or switching between many targets like OSU or Grid Shot Ultimate in aim labs, then yes, 4000 Hz actually makes a difference. But if you are someone who is playing a slower paced game where what you need to hit is precise targets once in a while, like games like Valorant, games like Counter-Strike, then in that case, 4000 Hz polling rate probably isn't quite worth the battery life sacrifice and the additional cost. That's my take on it. Some people might be inclined to disagree, but it really depends on you. So then, the Pulsar X2V2, is it worth it over the original X2, and is it worth the upgrade? Starting off with, is it worth it over the original X2? And the answer is absolutely yes. Sure, it's only marginal changes everywhere, but there are substantial enough of them to justify getting the X2V2 over the original X2 if you're coming from another mouse and you're looking to upgrade. It's not worth it to get the original X2 in my opinion, unless you don't care about those improvements at all. The optical switches are nice, the 4000 Hz polling rate support is nice, the new MCU is nice, and the better battery life. These are all great things. If you're coming from another mouse and upgrading, get the X2V2. However, if you're coming from an original X2, that kind of becomes more subjective. Measurements from other reviewers have indicated that the improvements in latency is like 5 or 10 milliseconds. And sure, it looks exciting on paper, but I don't know whether it's worth the money and whether it's worth contributing to more e-waste in the world to get the X2V2 if you already have the original X2. But if you think it is worth the upgrade, I mean, it's completely up to you whether 4000 Hz polling rate and the better clicks is, then sure, this is a nice little step up. I know there are some people who, just love the best specs, and if that's all you care about, I mean, who am I to stop you? Who am I to judge you? Feel free to do whatever you want. But if I was coming from another mouse and I thought the X2 was interesting and exciting, I absolutely would recommend the V2 over the original. And with that, thank you guys so much for watching. Subscribe. I'll see you guys next time.